Okay.
There it is.
Well, welcome everyone to Cultivating Nurturing Communities, which is the fourth of 7 conversations that I'm hosting this fall to celebrate the 7th anniversary of Freedom, my branding and marketing consultancy. So thank you so much for joining us and celebrating with me. I'm so excited to have you here. Before I introduce the guests, I want to use a quick exercise just to kind of get us in the right mindset. And it's called a chatterfall. And I'm going to share a prompt with you. And then I would like you to put your answer in the chat, but not share it until I give you the go ahead. And let's see. So the prompt is, I'm interested in this topic because. I'm just going to give you a few minutes or a few seconds to write that in the chat, and then we'll all share together. Okay. A few more seconds. Okay. We'll share in 3, 2, 1. So nurture and liking loving that word as it relates to women. I think it's one of our underused superpowers. I love that, Caroline. Joanna, meeting new people and curious to learn new communities. Kim, community is something I take very seriously and have gained so much from. Mab, to share the beauty of community. And Erica, a lot of potential and power in online communities. I completely agree. For building support, facilitating information and flow. That's great. Completely agree about all of those things. And I think we're going to touch on all of them in the course of our conversation. So to talk about this topic, I've invited leaders and members of Ladies Who Strategize, which is an online community of and for women identifying and non-binary strategists. And I joined that community over the pandemic. And with me, unfortunately, Anita, who is on the event page, couldn't join us. But today I have with me Kim McKenzie. Kim, why don't you wave, or I guess people can see your name, founder of Ladies Who Strategize and an independent brand strategy consultant. Marianne Bishop, who goes by Mab, who is an LWS team leader and a freelance brand strategy lead and consumer researcher. And Joanne Kennedy, who is an LWS member, brand and digital strategy consultant, Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree. So thank you so much, ladies, for being here today. And I really appreciate the time because I know everyone's really busy. So the first question I want to ask is revolves around this notion of vulnerability. I've participated in a lot of online communities, as I'm sure a lot of us have, especially with the pandemic. It was really the only way we had to interact with other people. And though I found many to be positive experiences and collegial, none really come close to the vulnerability and support that LWS offers. It's really, it feels extremely authentic. And you know, I feel the phrase safe space gets tossed around a lot, but it's truly, that's what it feels like to me. And so I'd like us to talk about how that's cultivated, both from Kim, your perspective as the founder, you know, how much of that was part of your vision for the community, and then how that's cultivated day in, day out by the leadership of LWS, as well as from a member perspective. So Kim, why don't you kick us off?
So it's very, very much on purpose. The internet's really not a safe space for women, like, period. And when you said that you've been part of a lot of different communities and didn't have that feel, I think that ultimately you, in order to have a place that is very psychologically safe for members, it really means that it has to be moderated, that you do have to have a really strong set of community guidelines and that they're followed. I think that there's also something which I feel very adamant about, is that this isn't my business. This isn't the only thing that I do, which means that I can make decisions that I feel are going to be best for the community that are not tied to financial gain or financial loss. And I think that that's incredibly important. So in my mind, it's more about being able to lay down those foundations. A lot of us are brand strategists on this call right now, or probably, you know, also listening in. As a brand strategist myself, I very much believe in brand purpose. And so for me, from the get-go, it was very much about like, if I'm going to create a safe space, I need to make it so that if 3 people show up, like awesome, wonderful, great. If 800 show up, awesome, wonderful, great. You know, but it shouldn't have to do with volume. It shouldn't have to do with trying to make a business out of something and having to make decisions around that. But it should always be focused on making sure that it's a space where people can feel heard, that they feel that they're going to be able to get the support that they need, but also understand that they need to offer that support first. So, and I think that that's something, especially as women, that we feel really, really strongly about. And it's definitely like the legend that I'm going to like die on. It's like offer before you ask. Like there's something really powerful about being able to get some skin in the game in the first instance. So for me, it's been very, very purposeful, and also bringing on the lead team. So I started this in 2016, but bringing on the lead team over the course of the pandemic, I started to see a lot of other communities flailing and going like, well, it's just because it's just one perspective that's running everything, and that's whack. So I need to get a lot more perspectives, both like American and non-American, getting a more global viewpoint on things. And I need a lot of other people helping me out that don't look like me. So that's also, I think, all very, very intertwined to it. But anyways, that was a long rambling monologue. Sorry.
Yeah, you mentioned just for people who may not be familiar with the community, you mentioned that notion of offering help before you ask for help. And that's kind of one of the key channels that the community offers that helps create that sense of vulnerability and safety and support. Mad, can you, as a member of the lead team, can you talk about other ways or activities that have been built into the community that help foster that sense of safety?
Yes. So I think one is definitely lunch break. In an industry that we work in that is very high demand, very fast pace. When do we ever take a pause in our day? But when we do, what are we doing with that pause? I'm just going to be honest. Prior to joining Lady Who Strategize, like sometimes it would just be taking a walk by myself, right? And just trying to decompress, or maybe I was reading a book. But I think a proper lunch break is like you really sit around the table with other people and you connect. And I think our lunch break is that I actually rarely ever see anyone eating lunch, which is ironic. But it's to me, it is more like it's like the virtual place that we're coming from all our Zoom meetings, or from the office, or after, if you're on another side of the globe, at the end of a really a tough week. It's a Friday, right? We all know how we feel on a Friday. And you can come in and like, it's about an hour where there's a facilitator who is responsible for holding space for as many women who show up as possible. At some point, so many women started showing up that we had to start doing breakout rooms and bringing in more moderators, which is really beautiful. And what the community can expect is that you're going to be able to hear other women and also voice yourself in a way that you cannot do in your professional, maybe even personal life. And I'm not going to lie, like what has come out of this is things that you would not expect. Like just, obviously to protect the privacy of the women, is that they've gone in there and said, like, my career is not doing well, and here's the reasons why. I am moving through grief. I am making so much money. I don't know what to do with it. Like everything that you cannot say, or you don't feel comfortable saying, gets said in that space. And now that it's been since 2020, since Kim started it, is that it's also understood, like once you come to that space, that it's consistent. Your voice will be heard, your opinions will be respected, and that you really can come with as much candor and honesty, and no one's going to criticize and judge you. We're there to support you. I don't think that many people have that space in our industry, and I don't think women are given the permission to have that space. So that's another one. The second one is Content Club, which I think is, again, centered around women, which is great. But I don't know, like, how many of you have been in your meetings at work and the topics of conversation are centered around men? Where for us, it's like, what do we as women want to learn? And, there's a lot of democratization around how that works, which is if there's a subject matter that we want to understand or better enforce our skill set, the community gets to vote on what that is. So no one's telling you like, this is what we're going to talk about. This is what we're going to learn. It is really much so like accessible, democratized, so that you can say like, actually, this is how I want to focus and further my career. So those are just a couple of things that we do as a community.
And Joanna, what's your perspective as a member? I know you've been pretty active on Lunch Club. How has that kind of affected your experience, or what have you gotten out of it?
Yeah. So I joined Ladies Who Strategize during the pandemic. I was looking for kind of groups to do some networking because I wasn't working at the time, and I was really kind of struggling, missing that connection that you have with kind of the folks that you work with actively, and also just that I've kind of said this a few times in lunch break and elsewhere, but that like in between meeting, hanging back in the conference room feeling where, you're meeting people on a more deep level, you're starting to actually become friends with people. And I feel that through lunch break quite a bit. I mean, I've been on and off active kind of again since 2020. And there are people's stories that I feel like I know the progression so much of kind of what they've gone through, not just in their career, but in their personal lives as well. And I think, again, in a way where everyone feels very safe to be able to share things that you would not necessarily share with coworkers. You would not necessarily share even sometimes with friends. I remember coming into a lunch break at some point during kind of the early pandemic, and the illness that everyone was getting was really triggering me because my mom passed away from lung cancer. And then I realized that had kind of tied into like my my looking for a new job, because I left a job right after my mom passed away. And so there were all these emotions that were bundled up, and I didn't really know how to tap into them or what I was really feeling. And I just kind of mentioned in lunch break, I think I'm realizing that these are all really connected, and it's making this time so much more difficult than it should be. And they gave me the floor to really like let it out. I cried so much in that lunch break. And people stayed on after for an entire hour to talk to me, the people who had time. And so, I think what I've just found is that the community is so willing to help and be there. But it's also such a great opportunity to like learn more about people, support people in our community, not only as strategists, but as women in the workforce. I think we just don't always get that leg up. And so I really appreciate that. And I think Content Club, just to build on what Mab had said, so often you're kind of prescribed things that you need to learn. And I think a lot of them really do ladder back up to act more like the men in your office. So, take public speaking classes because you're not being as assertive as the men in your office. That's not at all how this comes to be. It's very much, what do we want to learn? What do we want to talk about? Is there just a topic in general that we just are curious about? We're talking about fairy smut sometimes in our lunch break meetings. And like truly a book club can get started around that. And it's totally like, here's an interest that people have. Like, are there enough people who want to do it? Let's do it.
Yeah. I think Two, one thing I noticed is I think in the advertising industry, the kind of models for leadership kind of things I think we're all saying is, to be loud and to kind of take up all the air and all the space. And one thing that really I instantly noticed at Lunch Club was the way the facilitators created space for other people, were curious about, didn't dismiss people's emotions or what was happening, but was really curious about it and asked questions that allowed people to reflect on the situation. And just the modeling of that behavior had a tremendous impact on me, because I just don't typically see that in a work environment. So I thought it was just really, I've described it as magical because it is so exceptional, I think.
And I will say too, I'm a talker, but what I really appreciate is that we have space to both kind of really let our stuff out and talk with everybody in the room. But the folks that moderate are very good about, transitioning between to make sure that everybody has time.
Yeah, that's a great point. Obviously, with the focus of the community on women and female identifying people or non-binary people, diversity and inclusion, I'm imagining, is an important part of the vision for the community and how it's grown. And so in what ways is that cultivated among the membership, or in kind of attempts to attract a diverse and inclusive community?
Well, I mean, I can start us out. So something I touched on before is being able to recognize that I needed a lead team. I needed a bunch of people that were not just my perspective, not just my background, in a lot of different ways. And so that was one thing that I conscientiously have done. And I know it's made the group so much stronger for it. And it's also made it much more sustainable for me, and has made the group so much better for it. In terms of applications, so I reject about 40% of the people that apply. However, what I will say is that if someone applies who's trying to get into strategy and they're a woman or non-binary person of color, they're the only people that I let in. If it's anyone else that is just starting out, is interning, or is in their first year, then I always forward them along to We Are Next or Sweathead, or any of the other groups that are out there, or Strategize, that are catering more towards junior level folks. But I really see Ladies Who Strategize as it's a way for people to be able to make friends and also have options within their career. And, those two are in the correct cadence. So I can't make it, more clear in terms of being able to say, there are certain things that are set up to make sure that that everyone has a more fair shot from my perspective. And I'm always open to hearing other ways of making things more equitable, because that's really my goal. But Marianne, do you have any thoughts around that as being, part of the lead team?
Yeah, I think this one is super challenging, because there are communities that are focused on, right, just because you are of a certain background, right, whether you're Latino or whether you're Black. This one, right, is more focused on women. And so I think that as long as you're very true to being inclusive and people feel like they belong, then you're going to also naturally attract someone who's going to tell their other friends or people that there are trust in their community and bring those people along with them. I think a little bit of a sidebar from this conversation is I hear a lot about wanting to have more diverse workplaces or more diverse agencies. And one perspective, which Kim brings up, there's many perspectives I've always heard, is that it's well, there's just not enough candidates. Where in the Black community, what I hear is that no, don't go work there. It's not safe for Black people. And the idea of like, well, have you ever thought that you're not like finding enough candidates because it's like you have a reputation in those communities that you are not inclusive, that you are not welcoming of people of different backgrounds. And I think that, you know, you kind of shift that from like, if one person says who's of, you know, a different background from you says like, hey, everyone here belongs, they're going to tell other people. And I think that happens a lot at LWS, where it's like, they tell people that they trust and that there's like candor. And so I think as long as you're inclusive and welcoming, you're by nature going to bring in more diverse people, more diverse perspectives, and they're going to actually have traction in bringing friends over. So I think that's something that I strongly really believe, because sometimes it can very quickly lean into tokenism, where you're like, oh, we're diverse because we've got that one person. And then you go out to that one person and they're like, I hate it here, you know? And then it's like, no, that's not what it is. And so, yeah, that's, I think for me, it's like, just be a place that people want to come to because they feel like they belong, and you'll naturally be diverse. So.
Gotcha. No, I think that's a really great point, is to emphasize the culture, and the culture attracts by virtue of its own inclusivity.
Yeah, I also think, yeah, I was going to say, I also think too that, like, you know, the way that the team has really set things up, there's always a lot of opportunity for more inclusivity. So like most recently, they started setting up a coffee break because we do have a lot of members who are not just in the US. And so, you know, there were a lot of folks that heard about how awesome lunch break was, but they just really couldn't make it work with their schedule because it just wasn't at a time that aligned to their time zone. And so I loved seeing that. You know, I'm in the US, but nonetheless, I loved seeing that the team took that initiative to really say, okay, you know, there are folks that are feeling left out of this awesome experience. Let's give them an opportunity to do something similar. So I think that's one area where I've seen the team really like step up and make sure that, you know, things are not just coming from a US perspective, but we're getting a diversity of thought again in this, you know, in this space, really coming from different areas of the world. And then the last thing is, I think because of the safeness of the space, people are not afraid to have the difficult conversations of really like exploring what does diversity mean in their workplaces? How do they, you know, cultivate a more diverse environment? There was actually something that kicked off, was a conversation in lunch break, became a hive mind, which I don't know, Kim, if you want to maybe even talk about what hive mind is after. And then really became its own channel within the Slacks that we can kind of continue to talk about, like, what are the initiatives, what are resources that you can use, how do you talk to leadership within your company to make sure that you have an inclusive and inviting environment within your company. So I just think that LWS does a really great job of like spreading resources, but also creating opportunities for people.
Yeah, Kim, did you want to talk about Hive Mind?
Sure, I can give just a super quick overview. So Hive Mind just really came about the way that I was thinking about. I find webinars incredibly boring. I find online classes exceptionally boring. I spend like $2,000 on Columbia's strategic communications executive course, and only got like a third of the way through because I just kept on falling asleep. I'm just not an online learning kind of person, which is, you know, my deficiency over anything else. So I was trying to think of the fact that we have a lot of very, very smart women and smart people in the group. Why is it that only one person talks and then everybody else has to listen or gets an opportunity to potentially ask questions towards the end? And so I thought, well, what's a really non-hierarchical way of learning? And that would be sort of like everyone bringing a piece. And so that's how Hive Mind came about. So we vote on topics. People can suggest topics and then we vote on them. And then everyone's expected to bring kind of like 2 things that they've learned that are really helpful around this topic. So we've had hive minds, not just on strategic things, but I really see LWS as being something that you can bring, you know, it's not like your whole self, which I think is a load of hooey, but you can actually show up as who you are. So we've had hive minds, on strategic stuff, but we've also had hive minds on buying your first house. We've had hive minds on Oh gosh, I'm totally drawing a blank, Marianne. Can you remember any of the other ones? We've had them like for a number of different things.
Negotiation? Was
Oh
that?
yeah.
Yeah, we definitely had one on
Negotiation. Money finance, that one was popping.
Yeah, we have a lot of financial related just events overall and conversations. That's something I'm very, very adamant about. That is not something that you can be passive about in our lives. You cannot. Like there's no if, ands, or buts. Like you have to take ownership over it.
I think too, one, this is all part of something that really differentiates LWS and is part of what makes it unique, and its culture is unique, is I think in other communities, whether it's on a Slack channel or whatever the platform is, it's all just kind of conversations, right? Basically like messaging, which can be fine. But oftentimes it's not taken to that in-person level. And by in-person, I mean, if it's something like this, where we're talking face-to-face or physically in person, where you can actually develop the conversations that you started to have via messaging with a kind of more in-depth exploration of something, whether that's through lunch break or hive mind or whatever it might be. And the sort of welcoming of not just professional topics, but personal topics, because many other communities, it's kind of, we're just going to talk about this professional thing, and your personal life has nothing to do with it, even though we know the personal spills over into the professional all the time. And I think that's one of the things, welcoming those conversations is one of the things that makes the community feel so safe. So in terms of engagement within the community, I feel like it's super active. It's one of the most active communities I've seen, both just in terms of the different channels and the conversations that happen there, as well as participation in these kind of events. So I want to start with you, Joanna, which is kind of what's, I don't even know how to kind of word this, but what compels you to reply to someone, or to post a question, or to share something? Kind of what is it that makes your contributions feel appreciated, or that they will be welcome? Kind of what gets you excited about participating in the community?
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like there's really like a clear-cut camaraderie just across like the entire the entire group. Like even people who do not make it to lunch breaks, where I think we get really, really close in lunch breaks, but like just in need a hand. I mean, Kim continues to remind that group too that you need to answer people before I know every like month or so, Kim does a check-in of like, reminder, if you've got an ask, make sure you go and you help people first. But I love it because it is a really good, like, it makes sure that things are being engaged with. It makes sure that people are actually like invested in helping others in the community, not just asking for help. And I do think that that's a core differentiator between LWS and other communities, is really people just drop things into the community, get the answers that they want, and they walk away. And that's not what LWS is all about. Like, there's folks who, again, like kind of seeing the threads of conversation that pass through all different levels of LWS. So like folks who, mention in lunch break that they were laid off and they're not sure what they want to do next. And we say, that's awesome that you are coming to this community to ask a question and you're being vulnerable. You should put yourself into the careers page or into the career exploration page to talk more about what you're looking for in your next step. And then you get people who will answer them there and provide additional, like, hey, your resume is looking really good, but I would change this, this, and this. Like, I think that would be helpful for you. I've shared people on LinkedIn that I barely know, but I know them through lunch break now. And so I feel like I can vouch for them to a certain extent because I can see that they're smart. I can see that they're energetic. I can see that they'd be a great fit in terms of, any company that they would join. Whether I truly know their skill set or not, I do feel comfortable still saying, I'm happy to help you. And I think that that's just the spirit that LWS cultivates, because there is so much focus on don't just come here to be self-served. Make sure that you are putting things forward.
Kim and Matt, what about you from a kind of leadership perspective? What are some of the things that you do to encourage participation and welcome and show that it has value for the community?
Matt, would you like to go? You can talk about the question of the week.
Yeah. A couple things that come up is, Kim is always gracious, but I do want to be clear is that there's behind the scenes, there's rigor about this because it's part of it is organic, but also is that there is intention and thought. So, I think in terms of like the spirit of generosity that this community has, it's like, I think that it attracts a certain type of woman or, and so it's like, for me, it's like, I'm a feminist in business. And so what that means is I'm invested in furthering the interest and gifts of women in my industry. And I think everyone is there to help each other win, not compete. And I think when you sort of have that sort of mindset, like you want to come in and say like, oh, this person's like really has a question. And it's like, I want to help that person get a little bit ahead incrementally, even in their day. And I think that I will say that like, what am I? I've been here for six years. I don't know how long, but I know my career is in a different place because of this community. And because I believe in community, I want other women to have that experience too. Yeah. So, we do have the Need the Hand channel. We do have the lunch breaks, the content, and the hive mind where women are helping each other there. And then for also people who may not necessarily either be able to make those because of their schedule, might be more of a Slack person, might be camera shy. We have, just more digital ways that you can contribute. And so one of the things that we do is we do a question of the week. Where, every Monday morning, we go out with a question to the whole community. And, it's a question where it sits at different levels. It could just be a cheeky question, like what's your favorite recipe right now? To it can be a very in-depth one around your career, which is like, what is like the one career ambition you've yet to achieve? And why have you not achieved it? So it can be very direct and it can be very vulnerable. And I personally love also reading people's comments and seeing like, hopefully it'll generate a discussion that again, you're not having in the conference room and the Zoom channels of your current career, but you're going to be having it within a community. So I think that is also another way for engagement. And I promise you, we are always looking for those opportunities. We're also looking to create them too, as well.
Kim?
Sorry, my kitten is sneezing. You hear like that in the background. Well, I mean, I would say that another thing that we do that we haven't touched on yet is in-person events. We're not just digital by a long shot. We've done tons and tons of in-person events. We had our first international retreat last year. We got another one coming up in February. And I mean, when it comes to, when I think about the things that would prevent someone from feeling comfortable participating in any way, shape, or form, at the beginning of the retreat last year, and any time that someone showed up like late, that their ride had gotten in or their flight got in, I would sit them down. I would welcome them. I would let them know to like stay off your phone. We're here to actually interact with one another or nap, it is, and eat and enjoy each other's company. But one thing that I really that I made a point of saying to everyone is there is enough. We're not in competition. There's enough for everyone. Do not feel like the women at this table are your competitors. They might be your competitors. You may be going up against them for different projects, but that's the client's business. That's not our business. We help each other out. And I think that helped to set the tone for everyone feeling more comfortable in sharing where they were at, where they needed help, and also offering help.
I love that because I feel like kind of at a community level, the community guidelines function that way, kind of setting the tone, because you have to have kind of some parameters, right? Because otherwise it's undefined and people would do anything and it would kind of devolve. So I think I think it's important to understand about communities that it's something that you don't just do once and you having guidelines, but you're constantly reiterating that from kind of popping in and offering a friendly reminder to share, help someone else before you ask for help, or, even just in person reminding them. I think it's kind of part of the maintenance of the community that's just important.
And it has to be consistent, and it has to be present, not in just words, but also showing. I mean, it just kind of goes back to that old school, which, I guess in a lot of ways is not old school. Like the kind of behavior that you want to see in people, you need to demonstrate that yourself.
Right.
And that was something that, as Ladies to Strategize has grown, it's really definitely made me a lot better friend, a lot better human, and really gotten me to consider how things sound to other people, and also having this sort of like brand purpose, brand values that I worked on, or that the lead team and I put together, and finding different ways of being able to execute on those.
Yeah. Looking ahead, kind of what's the goal of the community? So, I know from my experience, I joined during the pandemic, so I only know it as an online community. I haven't had the ability to do anything in person yet. And obviously it existed. I think you founded it in 2016, Kim, is that right?
Yep.
So it existed for like 4 years before I knew of it. And so what's the vision for the future? What are you hoping to do moving forward?
Gosh, that's a really good question. It's something that I'm working on with another lead team member, Natalie Crosby. I mean, at the end of the day, I want to make sure that the group is sustainable, that it can sustain itself, that everyone in the lead team, it's a revenue share business, which means that everybody gets a percentage of how we do, which covers our time. And I want to make sure that it can continue to sustain itself. I want to make sure that any experience that you have that is with LWS, that it helps move you forward in terms of having better friendships and being able to have more careers with your options with your career. I want to make sure that in-person events, and it's going to sound kind of funny, but that we are really being able to offer something that is nice. It's really nice. It's a great experience. And I don't mean nice as in like everyone's getting along, although that definitely happens. I mean, our retreat last year had 17 women and 0 drama, 0. And when I say like just having a nice experience, like one of the things that Nab and I have been working on is sponsorships for the retreat that we've got in February. And now we're getting pummeled with brands who really want to be able to support us in some way, shape, or form. In my view, anytime that you take any financial sponsorship, you're beholden to that brand in some way, shape, or form. So we're being very, very selective as we think about that, and in most cases defaulting to product donations, because we don't want to be beholden in any way, shape, or form to having to do something that a brand might ask us to do or want us to do that we don't feel comfortable with. So I know that sounds probably very like unfocused and a little bit rambling, but in my view, I just want to make sure that the group continues to be helpful and continues to fulfill a really, really vital need in terms of like providing a space for women to be able to start to have relationships and non-binary folks to have relationships with other people within our industry, so that they no longer feel that, oh, I just got let go from my job, I guess I have to reach out and like work my network now. It's like, it should not be transactional. This should be something that should come as naturally as breathing, as naturally as feeling like you have the support and can stay within this industry because you have people around you to either help you stay in this industry or be able to find other ways of being or moving forward outside it, which is already starting to happen with a bunch of members, which I find exceptional.
Mab, do you have any other perspectives on the vision for the future or goals or moving ahead? I think that, obviously as the community grows, and it would be impossible for one person to manage it, right? Because it's like, I don't know, how large is it now?
It's just about 2,000.
Right. So sponsorships or some kind of partnerships makes sense. Can you talk to us about how you kind of talked about where you landed in terms of the shape those partnerships take, but what about how you even make a decision about the brands that make sense for LWS? Because I know that there are brands can now do kind of paid job postings. So that was kind of the first way I think that they showed that kind of sponsorship showed up. So how are those decisions determined as a lead team? What are you looking for in partners?
I can take this one.
Oh, she was asking you. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh, this is for me. So I think, well, we love taking baths and we love talking about business. I'm just gonna be honest.
Push queen.
Yes, push queen.
We love Kush Queen. So yeah, it's baths and business. So yeah, I think we have really good taste. And so I think brands who sort of reflect sort of that sensibility and that quality and a little bit of elevation, I just think, oh my God, we are just so cool and we have such class, so much class. But we're also, we are women who sit in positions of power and we work in business, and that commands a certain level of brands that I think really understand that about us is that, again, we're centered, that we come first, and that we have, we really work with brands. And so we have a high standard for brands because we work with brands all day long. So I think is along the lines of that as well. And then I think too, we have also this progressiveness about us. I think a brand that's a very future thinking and doing things a different way. So yeah, I think like Kush Queen is a perfect example is that, it's in the cannabis space, but it's a high end product, for taking high quality baths. And, I'm here for it. I hope that's the future of business is making money and taking baths. So that's probably me in the leadership meetings talking about that.
Well, something we really enjoy that we've used ourselves, that is clean beauty, that is on the nicer end of things. What I will say though is that we were taking on sponsorships with agencies, and we still do have a couple agency sponsors. We got ourselves into a little bit of a pickle with one where we started to recognize that actually it was a bit of pink washing of them contributing. And so after, of course, I had like a total freak out about it on my own, and then brought it to the lead team, and we went, okay, learning moment. And then we wrote up some tenets or guidelines for ourselves in terms of the types of agencies or what kind of questions they were going to be asking. And they're tough questions for some agencies and some companies, and puts a lot of people out of the running, mainly because, going back to the very first question that you had, Lee, is that's like, this is not something that we depend on, that we have to bend our ethics in order to say yes to things. It is nice. It is icing. It is something that helps us to be much more sustainable. However, all of us are very, very good in our careers. Like Anita is the head of strategy in the LA office of McKinney. Mab and I have very, very successful freelance practices. Same with Natalie. Nishida works at Rockstar Games. Like we have our own stuff going on, and I think that is vital in terms of us being able to make decisions and to have a really strong set of, we're going to do this for these reasons, we're not going to do that for those reasons, and we're all aligned on it. Like there's very, very little discussion around stuff like, because we're pretty clear on the types of brands and companies that we feel comfortable with and the ones that we wouldn't. And at any time, if any demonstrate any kind of behavior that that any of us feel uncomfortable with, like we will write them that check and give their money back immediately. Like there's no pause about that.
So for the last question I want to ask you, and this sort of ties into what you were just talking about in terms of the kind of agency partners and the different things that have happened as you've kind of figured out who to work with, who not to work with. Creating this vibrant community where you have women learning how to negotiate, women learning how to stand up for themselves, women seeking out careers that fulfill them and make them happy. How do you think Ladies Who Strategize have, to what extent, I guess, do you think Ladies Who Strategize have actually impacted our industry?
I would leave that to Joanna and Mab in the first instance. I'm going to step back on this one.
I mean, I will definitely say that I think for myself at the very least, like I am so much more conscious of like who I'm willing to look at and who I'm not willing to look at based on the information that I'm learning in LWS, whether it be the negotiation tactics or it be simply somebody saying, "Hey, I'm not having a great time at my job and here's why." You start to really understand places that are, you know, great to work with and great and places that are not. I also think too that, you know, there is so much member support where again, folks are really wanting to take things back to their companies and help to improve them. And I think that's one thing that, you know, you guys have noted. We're all in places in our career where we do have some sort of impact within the companies that we work for. Or, you know, a lot of us are freelancers as well. While we may not have the same investment in the companies, I think we all bring a lot more to the companies that we work with than most freelancers potentially would, because we really come with this kind of, you know, broader perspective from having this community. And so I do think that, you know, I've seen at the very least, like I know that I now have folks that I can go to across this industry to learn more about things authentically, to really understand the culture of companies I'm looking at, to really see if there's opportunities to push the culture at places if I'm still interested, but maybe I'm a little bit, you know, anxious about something. And I think that that's really unique and special because most other communities do not have that vulnerability where you really can, you know, identify where you can have impact beyond just, you know, the conversations you have internally within the community. I just really feel like LWS does kind of provide that outward halo to a certain extent into the industry. And I commend the lead team because again, you know, just going back to what you were saying previous to this, I feel confident when I look at things that are paid within the community too. I know that if it's a paid job listing, it's been vetted. It's not something where, you know, this is a company that's going to pay me like dirt and they're just hoping to get by throwing a job posting out there and they paid for it and that's how they slipped through. I know it's been rigorously vetted, and so that's one thing as a member that I think we can all like appreciate as well.
Nav, anything?
I think simply put, before LWS, I felt like my career was something that just happened to me, and I would just be grateful for any opportunity. And I think now I feel much more in control, empowered, and in choice in my career. And that knowing that when I see other women trying to figure things out and making choices and being more selective and raising their standards, I am inspired by that behavior and now really push and expect that for myself. I think another thing too is this is so personal, but I just want to say this because I know other people feel the same way. But I think business is for like sometimes celebrated for the extroverted, highly social, go out and party all night person. And I think that if you are a shy and introverted person but ambitious in your career, like where is the space for you? And I think that that is something that is really important, is that no matter what community you're in, hopefully it's something that supports you, what you want in life, and really holds you in that, rather than think that it's something that's a weakness. I think that's really important. Yeah.
Kim, any final thoughts before we open up to questions?
You know, I don't know if on like an industry level if we've helped or not, but I do know that I've had so many members become good friends, and regardless of whether they become friends or not, I get a lot of thank yous, which makes me feel great. And I do also know that I've gotten feedback around people going, or members going, wow, I just didn't know that that opportunity existed. I didn't know that I could think of things this way. I didn't know that I should be thinking of my career this way, or how I should be prioritizing certain things. I didn't know that I could negotiate in this way. And that's really the main reason why I set it up, is that I was really hoping that more women would get and non-binary folks would get an opportunity of being able to say that there's simply other ways of being, and that there are a lot of opportunities out there. There is enough for everyone, and we shouldn't be, you know, feeling insecure or feel like there's not enough. And that really comes down to us, and also being able to recognize that you are bringing a huge amount to the table, and you shouldn't be going, oh, thanks, you know, for anything that comes your way. You should be able to feel like, oh, they should be so lucky to have me. And that's actually how the job ads came about, is that it's like, we've curated this incredible list of members. Companies should be paying for the privilege of being able to get in front of them. That's exactly the way that I feel about it. And I've had a handful of members. There was one, I think like from Nike or something, kind of being like, oh, well, we're not going to pay for that. We're doing you a favor. And it's just like, oh no, sunshine, we're doing you a favor. Like that's not how this works. And like,
Sorry, Nike.
yeah.
Oh my God. Well, and that's, you know, that tells you something right there about the culture of the organization, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much. I so appreciate, even as someone who's in the community, I feel like I've learned a lot, and it's been great to kind of hear all these different perspectives, and thinking around how you approach community, how you cultivate a sense of vulnerability and belonging. So thank you so much. I know Tash or Tosh, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but if you want to unmute your microphone and ask your question, you can do that, or I'm happy to just read it from the chat, whichever you prefer. I can tell you that we do use Slack, is the platform that LWS is on. It's free to join, so there's no paid element to it apart from kind of the sponsorships and things that I think Kim has mentioned.
Well, we have Freelance Club, which is a paid channel.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah. Do you want to mention kind of what the difference is between why Freelance Club is paid?
So Freelance Club is paid because the members kind of demanded it. And it came about because we were having paid job options for freelance gigs. And the fact of the matter is that most agencies don't want to pay for freelance gig listings unless they go through a recruiter for some reason. So there was like a real bottleneck in terms of whether we just weren't getting any jobs because of it. And so I think it might have been Allison, who's based in Portugal, just asked, you know, can we just do like a paid option? Can we just do like a paid channel that we can share gigs very freely? And then my brain started to go, well, I've been doing freelance for over a decade now, so I probably could come up with some things that I wish that had been there. Mm-hmm. And then I started doing a lot of research around other groups online, just strategy, more like freelance, and they're crazy expensive. And I just thought to myself, like, okay, well, great for them. They're charging out the wazoo. I don't know whether people are like getting value out of that, but I'd much rather that we offer it at a what I consider and that the lead team consider a pretty fair amount, both on a monthly or on an annual. If you end up getting 1 gig from it, even like a couple hours of work is more than going to cover your entire annual membership. We have monthly events, and they're very tied into thinking about things in a more holistic sense as a freelancer. So earlier in the month, we had a financial planner do an AMA, and she specializes with freelancers. So being able to ask questions around that. I did an AMA, which is a sort of like, I've been doing this for ages. So if you've got any questions, just send them my way. We've got a Hive Mind coming up on legal stuff. And then we have an AMA with a lawyer that one of our members has been using for several years. So people will be able to get an opportunity to ask about contracts, ask about things that they should or shouldn't be signing, what they should be asking for. So I'm really trying to think about it. We have about 6 months of programming lined up. I'm trying to think about it along the lines of, yep, there's a lot of things that we need and tools that we need to understand and things that you need to take more of an active role in as a freelancer. But then you also have this whole other life that you should be looking after. So so I'm trying to build it so that it is something that is going to be well worth the value several times more than what folks are paying, so that my conscience feels really good about it and that members feel like they're getting a lot of value out of it.
In the last couple seconds, I just want to say that freelance club was really like the way it came about was just such a beautiful example of how LWS works. It was someone citing, hey, I'm not feeling like I'm seeing these freelance opportunities anymore. And instead of the team going, well, we're putting paid in front of this, like, if it's this, it's this, if it's not, it's not. They said, tell us more. What are you missing from this community and how can we fill that gap? Which I really appreciated as a freelancer as well.
Yeah. And I think recognizing that people who are independent have different challenges and issues than people who are working at companies. And so it's nice to have your own kind of sub place to go and talk about those things.
And people that are quote unquote like freelance curious, people that are willing to pay for access to other people that have been doing this for some time and doing it in a professional manner and are not just like cooling their heels between permanent jobs. There's a very, very big difference between those kinds of folks. So every good thing that I've learned about freelance has either been screwing up hardcore and learning the hard way, or talking with other friends of mine that have been doing it for a really long time, or just as long as I have, and hearing their perspective on how they approach things. So with that in mind, that was like, for me, the big insight of going, oh, okay, they just really want access to each other. And I think I can put together some really good programming within the lead team and otherwise. And this is something that they want to pay for so it could be sustainable to be able to put this together.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. I know we're right at 2. So thanks so much for sharing all your ideas and experiences and feedback. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate your time and spending time with you this afternoon. So thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you so much, Lee.
Bye.
Bye.